Welcome to the podcast Women Ending War with me, Dr. Elana Stockman, a Jewish American Israeli feminist author and anthropologist, and my co-host Eva Dalak, a Muslim Palestinian citizen of Israel, world-renowned expert in conflict transformation and peace activator. Together, we are here to demonstrate that there is another path, that peace is possible, and that women must lead the way. We are on a journey to activate peace. Thank you for being here with us.
صباح الخير إلانا.
صباح النور فاخرة. So nice to see you today.
Thank you so much. I am delighted, excited for the opportunity that both of us will engage in great conversations about women, engage in peace building, in conflict resolution, in taking this place for a different and better situation and future.
Amen. That sounds great. It's really great to see you again also, Fakhira. We met during season 1. Mm-hmm. Just to remind everybody, Dr. Fakhira Halloun is an expert in peace building and conflict resolution. So it's an honor to have you again, to be working with you again and talking more about all the things going on in our country. Fakhira is also a Palestinian citizen of Israel from up north, Daliat al-Carmel, where things are not so easy right now, lots of rockets.
I mean, this identity places us in a certain circumstances and challenges at the same time, being part of the conflict and in between Palestinians and Israelis as well. And we will talk about which role we can take, we cannot take in all this conflict.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about for sure. And actually, I remember from season 1 when we talked about identity, when we talked about your doctorate and the multiple sides of the identity and the tensions. That was super interesting for me, I just want to say. You know, I learned so much from you.
Yeah, very interesting. I said I started to think about that we are in and in between Palestinian citizens of Israel, that we are in part of the state of Israel as citizens, and we are also part of the Palestinian people at the same time, and we are in between both people. So this kind of status is very challenging, and it provides opportunities as well.
Opportunities. Like to be here on Women Ending War, the Women Ending War podcast.
Yes.
So tell me, Fakhira, what drives you? Like what brings you here today to do this podcast?
Or what brings me here, I guess, to decide to be a peacemaker, or to decide to be somebody who will work to end the occupation and promote a different future between Palestinians and Israelis. In the current reality, you are alienated because the collective around you, in the Israeli side, in the Palestinian sides, just do not believe that a different future could be possible between both sides.
Yeah.
And you need to rekindle this commitment each day, not just to rekindle it, to look for sources within you, that to rekindle this commitment and to say that I don't want to sit side. I don't want to be angry about the situation and see myself as just a victim, but I have agency to take.
I feel the same way, actually, as a Jewish Israeli. You know, it's really complicated to step away from the victimhood. You know, a lot of Israelis also say, oh, we're in the middle of this war, October 7th, you know, victims. And it's really hard to sort of get people to engage beyond that and to say, hang on one second, let's go deeper. Let's go deeper. Let's talk about vision. Let's talk about what we want as a society in general. You know, what does it mean to live here together? What does it mean to share this land together, to share this space together, to share a future together? Look beyond the language of victimhood to a future of peace, a future of humanity, a future in which every human being is a human being. Everybody who's here matters. Everybody who's here deserves basic respect and basic rights. You know, it is very hard to have that conversation in a lot of places right now.
Yeah, how we free ourselves from a victimhood discourse and category of discourse, the discourse of victimhood, how we free ourselves and our consciousness from that discourse and story about ourselves to take a story about agency for change, that we can create and think about different political vision, how we can create the imagination of different political vision between Palestinians and Israelis. I think this is the most challenging thing. And for women to take this role, I think this is...
Yeah, why Dafka women? Like, why women? Why is it important to you to come to a podcast where it's women ending war, where we're focused on women?
Mm-hmm. I think women have their voice have a weight, and they can change reality. But usually, the voices of women are marginalized and not being part of the discourse about the relationship between people. And because the discourse, it's about war and dehumanization and violence and militarism. And the women bring different values and they can allow us to think about different future. And women can also allow us to know the wide impact of the conflict about the society, about the different groups, because they are engaged in different groups. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Also, there are 0 women around the table in terms of all the decision making about this war is rooms full of all men. Whether it has to do with attacking and violence, or whether it has to do with the hostages. I mean, I heard one hostage. Remember Rachel Pollen Goldberg, her son Hirsch was killed about 2.5 months ago. So before, when they were really fighting really hard, and she said, if we had mothers around the table, hostage mothers and Palestinian mothers sitting around the table, this war would have ended a year ago.
Definitely.
Hostages, she said the hostages would have been home a year, right away. So, because women bring perspectives. We have the perspectives a little bit of like the outsiders. We're like quintessential outsiders because we're outside of the room. And as the outsiders, what we end up doing is we end up picking up the pieces from all these decisions about the violence and and the militarism and so we have all those perspectives about the real impacts of these decisions, and yet we're excluded from decision making.
Totally. And I guess women can make a huge difference, and they can bring a comprehensive resolution rather than just bringing a conflict management or just duplicating the same reality. They can really tackle the root causes of the conflict and the impact, and can offer a comprehensive, a more understanding and a comprehensive solution. Yeah, but do you want to talk about what we want this podcast to be? Or, but what brought you?
What brought me
to do this podcast? Because it's your idea, Elana.
Well, a lot of the same things that brought you. For me, it's really, I mean, you and I have very different perspectives, right? You're Palestinian Israeli, and I'm a Jewish Israeli, an immigrant even, I'm American Israeli. So I have lots of different perspectives, but I also share the belief that we can and need to be doing this differently. I am appalled by the dehumanization of the other. I'm appalled by the militaristic language that drives everything. I talk about the wasach. It's always wasach. In the army, like a lot of people, I try to, when I have conversations in English with people are Israeli, and I say, so much of this war is about wasach, and like, what's wasach? And I'm like, wasach is this posture. It's this posture which says, look at how much stuff I've got. Look at how many guns I have. Look at how great I am because I got power and might and I can kill the other, basically. I mean, it's not exactly, but, in the army, there's a lot of this like competition over like, oh, look how powerful I am. And it's a showing off thing. And I feel like the posture of wasach is exactly what's driving this war. When you hear conversations, let's say about Iran, right? Everybody's like, oh, Iran is so scary and all of that. And it's like, if you listen to the conversations about Iran from the prime minister and from the people around us, it's always this posturing. It's always this, we're going to show them and we're going to show them. And, the result of all of that is escalation of violence, right? The result of that is that we had 400 rockets headed here, and like, all of that wasach posturing makes us all bait. we're all targets because, we're going to show them. And so that is like horrifying to me that that there's this nonstop escalation of violence that puts us all at risk, and that there's nobody suggesting, hey, why don't we do something else, right? We've been doing the exact same thing for the past 20 years. We have one way of doing it, and it's made everything worse. I talk about this all the time, how the last year has been the worst year in Israeli history when it comes to death and violence and all of that. And it's just getting so clearly whatever it is that we're doing, is not working. Whatever it is that we're doing is making things worse. And then I point out, and they're like, but Iran, was so scary. So I'm like, well, you know what? When those 400 rockets from Iran were headed towards us, you know who saved us? Jordan saved us. Jordan knocked down the rockets. Why? Because we have a peace agreement with Jordan. Because with Jordan, we have already made peace. And as a result of the peace, we have safety and security with Jordan. So, the only thing that will make us all safer is not the wasach, is not the bombardment, is not the violence, is not, doing the same thing we've been doing all along. The only thing that will give us all peace is if we make an agreement, we make a peace agreement. It's the only thing that will bring us security. If we have peace with Jordan, we have peace with Egypt. That makes us safer and secure. So that's what's motivating me here. What's motivating me here is to get the voices out there, especially the voices of women who have different perspectives, who are looking at a long-term vision for how we can make our society different, peaceful, humane, not full of all of this like endless bloodshed, but like something else. And I'm trusting, certain women like you, Fakhira.
Thank you.
Who I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so happy to have become friends with you. It's such a blessing. So it's a privilege, and, to be able to bring all these voices and get these voices out there and say, we need something else. We need different thinking. We need different strategies. We need a different approach so that we can create a different future.
Yeah, this is interesting because we want to bring women that will break this discourse of violence and militarism, and that power is only the way to bring us to solve the conflict. And even what you are saying, that this discourse that has been filling the mindset in the Israeli society, that just power and militarism, what will bring us victory, what will bring us security, and it's seeing the other side just as enemy, that and the future with the Palestinians or with the neighbors is just zero-sum game, but not thinking about partnership, a future that could be shared, a future that there's this discourse is not there, and it's like somehow they occupy. This toxic discourse occupy the mindset of most of the Israelis and most of the new generation. And I guess today we will hear some of our interviewee. She will talk about the occupation of the mind and how we freed the mind from this toxic and create a discourse of empathy and respect for the other side and equality and freedom and shared future. And this is the woman that we want to bring here in order to break and destabilize for us this kind of discourse and just challenge it and bring for us new values and new principles for our future inside Israel, and also for our future between Palestinians and Israelis, that we share this homeland together, and how we can bring these kind of principles and values.
Yeah, I totally agree. I say this all the time, that the violence is supported by rhetoric. Mm-hmm. The only reason there's all this violence is because there's all of this language behind it. Mm-hmm. My doctorate is in sociology, anthropology, and gender studies, education. It's a sort of mixed, but a big aspect of the work that I have been doing since then is analysis of language. Actually, I have a new book coming out in January.
Congratulations. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. And it's called In My Jewish State, and it's an analysis of the rhetoric behind the war, exactly what you're talking about. It's an analysis of the language that we use to justify things that should not be justifiable.
Totally.
So
we are bringing a new language through this podcast about the reality and about the read of the reality, and also new language that will bring us some hope that a different future could be possible between Palestinians and Israelis, a future that is both sides lives in equality, freedom, sharing the homeland, and dignity and self-determination. And we want these women to help us. Humanity, bringing
compassion,
definitely.
That all human beings are human beings. That's like the basis.
Yes.
That all human beings that are here, we're all human beings. We all belong here. We all have the right to be here. We all have the right to live freely, with freedom.
Yes. And we talked a little bit about what we the podcast, that this podcast, we want women to shed the light on women that have really a commitment to change reality. But also we talked a little bit about the issue of women, that it's not just women around the table what's matter.
Right.
In our reality, Elana, if women are around the table and don't have agenda and political agenda to tackle the violent structure of the occupation, to tackle the reality and talk about, give a vision how they will change this reality. So I don't think
it's not just any women. We're not. It's a very painful thing what you're raising, by the way. It's really painful because it's not all women that are allies to this process, right?
Yes.
We see in the current government there are a few women, not a lot. It's a very low bar in the government. It's one of the lowest numbers of women in the government we've had in 30 years. But even the women who are in the government, some of the women there are, like my Elana is a self-described racist. She says, I'm a proud racist, for example.
These women, I don't think they will bring us a different future, or they are this kind of women that we want to shed the light on them. We want to shed the light on specific women that forwarding for us the reality, for a better reality of equality, freedom, and between both sides, and really, and talking also about the systematic things.
Systematic.
As you said. And it's not just a number of women being around the table what's matter. The matter is the say of the woman.
Right.
What she's talking about, how she is challenging the reality and talking about the real aspects of the conflict. Like for me, today, I do want to shed the light about women that talk about ending the occupation, ending the Israeli control, and going for a solving the conflict. And for me, it will be challenging to encourage voices that normalizing the occupation and do not see it as the main core aspect of the conflict. For me, for me, these kind of women duplicate the same reality in the name of peace building. And it's not the kind of woman that I think we need to be in the front line to take us from this darkness of reality.
It's really hard what you're talking about because you can barely say the word occupation in Israel. If you say the word occupation, people are like, oh, what? How could you say that? And you hear like, oh, the occupation doesn't exist. Oh, it's a big lie. Oh, people are making, it's anti-Semitism. I heard this actually in an article that I was writing about 6 months ago. I write for JTA periodically, and I did an interview about anti-Semitism in America. And with one of my interviewees, she said, oh, yes, it was terrible. We had this event on campus, and suddenly somebody used the word occupation. And I said, what? So much anti-Semitism. Right? So that's what you hear. You hear as soon as you say the word occupation, somebody says, what? How could you be so anti-Semitic? And it's like, no, talking about the occupation is not anti-Semitism. Talking about the occupation is real. It's reality. It is what exists. But we're so, when I say we, I say like Jewish Israelis are so, Jews and Israelis, I would say, have been so trained in, the language. I was brought up in language, how to push back.
It's blind. It's misleading you because everybody believe outside of Israel, most of the world today know that the core issue of the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis are the occupation and are the apartheid and the systematic control on Palestinians and their right for self-determination and freedom. So it's the core issue from my perspective. And I think the Israeli society was misled. And also they misled to see that this is the issue in the relationship between Palestinian and Israeli. And this is what shaping the violence and shaping the attacks as well, because you cannot prison people for so long and attack them and take their lands and destroy their
and control their movements and control so much
every
control.
aspect in their life and expect that they will not resist.
Right. I understand that. But that's a lot what my book is about, by the way. My book is about the language of that, all of that training into like the language of, not seeing the truth. Which
so you agree when you don't see the truth, so you are support the government in their policies, because we will talk about it probably next interview. We will talk more about the exposing the Israeli society about the occupation. So I will not take, because when you see what's happening, so you cannot be calm and you need to take action. So it's better not to know.
Right.
Okay? And agree on your name to make violent actions and control and
we have to say it.
It's suppression.
Right. Audre Lorde said it. She was a feminist poet, and she said you have to name the thing in order to say it, in order to know it. Well, you have to give it a name. Once you give it a name, it doesn't exist until you give it a name. You have to speak to the thing in its name.
Definitely. So just to return back that I think this podcast taking us maybe for another level of digging also deeply in a direct and courageous way about the reality, while our reality and thinking about different future between Palestinian and Israeli could be challenging, and there's also contradiction. And it's not easy for me as Palestinian in the midst of what's happening today and the war on Gaza after the 7th of October, everything, to imagine or to start talk together about a different future in the midst of dehumanization and hatred in the air everywhere. So it will be challenging for us also to host voices of women, but at the same time we think it will shape for us. It will help us to shape also different language about the reality and what's possible between both people.
Yeah. You were on a couple of episodes in season 1, and there were challenges. Do you want to talk about some of those challenges?
Yeah, these challenges, I guess it's we don't know we know whose we are bringing to talk about peace building and conflict resolution. And for me, I told you, for me now, this is one of the main challenge is when I see Israeli woman speaking about promoting peace with language that normalizing the occupation or do not see the occupation as a critical issue or bring soft language about the occupation as it's acceptable. So these kind of things is very challenging for me. And at the same time, I am a co-host here. So I have also our commitment is to empower women to bring their voices, to be full self-expressed. And at the same time, when these voices, in my point of view, duplicating the oppression of me and my people, so here will be the challenge for me. Should I argue with this kind of voices? This was in the first episode, which some of the voices was, in my interpretation, normalizing the occupation, normalizing the control over my people in a soft language under the umbrella of peace. But I would argue for this. I would argue if I wasn't interviewing.
So you have two hats, right? So the one hat is the hat of your people. You want to say, I want to represent who I am and my identity people. And then the second hat is the hat of the facilitator.
Definitely.
Where you want to facilitate open conversation and give voice to all, especially give voice to women. And sometimes those two things can be in conflict.
Especially as Palestinian, when we are interviewing Israeli women, how I will dance with her content in a way that I don't see that I am cooperating to give legitimacy for the oppression of my people.
I just want to
this
say,
would be the challenge for me.
Yeah, I just want to say that it's a very deep challenge for women in general, and that in general, there's part of my doctorate was about feminist pedagogy, about what it meant to do education in a feminist perspective. And feminist pedagogy basically says give space to everyone. You want to break down social hierarchies. You want to create a space where everyone is equal and everybody has a voice, which is part of what we're doing here in this podcast.
Definitely.
Also, it's a feminist kind of space in that sense of raising up the voices and making sure that, everybody has, even if you don't officially have an official position of power in the official hierarchy of decision making, here in this space, everybody is equal and everybody has that. But the challenge of feminist pedagogy is that, well, what happens if there is somebody who really deserves more space than the other, right? So let's say, and I've been in spaces like this. So let's say you have someone who's been working in a field for 30 years and they've, done 30 years of work and they have experience and expertise and books written and degrees and all of that, versus someone who's 18 years old and comes there and is also around the table. So feminist pedagogy says we're all equals, right? But at a certain point, that could also become disrespectful to the person who actually deserves to have a higher space in the hierarchy. So it is really a paradox. It's a paradox of feminist activism in general. Definitely. We want to say on the one hand, equality to all women, but on the other hand, it's not exactly that, because at the end of the day, we do think that certain voices and certain people do deserve a higher rank than others. And is there space for hierarchy in feminist activism? So that's like an ongoing dilemma that I often face.
I guess this is also something that probably will tackle it today in our interview. I guess it's also talks about white feminism and black feminism. And I think I want to add, like today there are several movements of women inside Israel and also with the Palestinians that are cooperating together under the umbrella of peace and peace building. But we can challenge some of these movements in a way that we think they are not really challenging the situation, and they are without intention or with intention do duplicate the same reality between Palestinians and Israelis and between occupier and people under occupation under the name of women engaged in peace.
Right.
So this is the question. Do we want to shed the light on these kind of efforts and give them power and legitimacy, or we want to challenge them in today, I think, with the reality today, and say these kind of efforts do not take us for a better future if we don't challenge the structure, the violence, and the control, and the occupation, and the apartheid, and also the dehumanization between both sides, also to the Palestinians, and the use of power. Both sides. If we don't challenge it and give it excuse and do not bring a human discourse toward both people, should we call it peace building in this reality? Will that help us? Because now we are in dark space. We need courageous voices. We need voices that speaks about moral values, about human values against violence, and do not give it an excuse from both sides.
Right. And who are, again, breaking down the system, breaking down the structures. Again, this is also a feminist dilemma, by the way. I'm sorry, I keep putting on my feminist hat. Just, for many years, I was very active in orthodox feminism, doing feminism from within Judaism. And one of the big criticisms, I did that for many, many years until I left. And the reason why I left was because I discovered that basically orthodox feminism is maintaining the structures. It is maintaining the patriarchal structures. Orthodox feminism is saying, let's fix this. It's called change from within, right? And change from within is where you're saying you're trying to fix it to make this better for women, better equality from within. But change from within basically means that I'm maintaining the patriarchal structures, and I'm maintaining the hierarchies and the violence, and and so that is, I came up against that brick wall very, very strongly, where things are not going to really change. Where in that case, for example, when you discover that everything needs male approval, no matter what. So it's like, okay, so what are we doing exactly? So I'm thinking about that as you're talking about, feminism, structural change, because, can you be a feminist? It's a big question in like the feminist world in general. Can you be feminist if you are, in favor of the occupation? And you're basically saying
totally.
no.
Can you work for peace to say I am a peace building movement of women to work with Palestinian women and do not talk about the occupation, or just claim that we are helping Palestinian women to improve their economical situation without to say that we are working to end the occupation? Is it like economical peace building for Palestinians without to talk about occupation? This can be called peace building, or it's this is what will make a different political future. So you are keeping the occupation, do not talk about the occupation, but claiming that you are working for peace.
Right.
It's like conflict management or conflict or squeezing the conflict, as Netanyahu and the Israeli government tried to do in the last 10 years, and we got this last escalation happening.
So could I also ask you something from like a different perspective, from my perspective, wearing my hat as like the Jewish Israeli for a second, because one of my challenges also from the perspective of where I come from is that, can you be, for example, a peace activist if you're not willing to say what Hamas did on October 7th was wrong? About saying like, I condemn violence, I condemn Hamas violence, I condemn the sexual violence that happened on October 7th. Because that was also, also from like a different perspective, but it's the same kind of idea of what you're saying is that, I feel like it's the same idea, is that if you're going to be around the table here, our table that we've created, if you're going to be around our table about peacemaking, when we want to say we want to condemn structural violence and we want to condemn violence, then it also means, condemning other kinds of violence too, even if it...
Totally. Actually, I am not confused in this part. Like for me, 7th of October, not just I condemn it, I think it's a massacre and it's a horrifying thing. And I don't think this is something that will help us to free us as Palestinians. And definitely I am against it as a way of resisting the occupation. So if you are with peace and if you are against violence, you cannot agree for 7th of October and do not agree about the war of genocide that's happening now in Gaza. So for me, I am against both things. You cannot say I excuse you. I don't think it will help us to give excuse for violence that's happening between Palestinian and Israeli. We are against violence of civilians. So for me, 7th of October, it's not acceptable. It's horrifying. It's a massacre. And also what's happening now in Gaza, the genocide. I am against it. So women voices should be against any violence. Right. It's a principles. We need to bring moral principles.
Moral principles.
Definitely. And this is something that women who are working for peace building will not be confused how they will review 7th of October or how they are reviewing what's happening now in Gaza, okay?
I'm so grateful for you for saying that, Fakhira, because like so often, again, because we've all been trained in this binary language, like you either, this black and white language, you either in this box or you're in that box, and one of the things that I feel like we can contribute also as women is breaking down all of those, binary constructs where it's like, oh, if you're not here, then you're there. Or if you're not here, then you're there.
Definitely.
As opposed to saying like, you can be both. You can be against violence here and against violence here. You can be against all of it. You can be against what happened on October 7th and also be against what's happening in Gaza now. Like those should not be contradictions, but we're like trained in this government that we have, we're trained to like think of it in these black and white terms. And I feel like going back to asking what the purpose of this podcast is and what brings me here, this is a big piece of what brings me here, is changing the way we think about these things. And what you talked about, like the underlying moral principle that could guide all of it. It's a different lens. It's a different way of looking at all of it that our leaders are not sharing. They're not I feel like the leadership is not representing the way I want to be thinking about things and the way I think we should be thinking about things. So I'm so grateful to you, Fakhira, for saying that and for basically expressing what I feel like is a shared vision between us?
Definitely. I think 7th of October, the massacre that happens and also the genocide happening now in Gaza shaked the world order. And we need, as a peacemaker, to have a moral say about these events that happened. Because if the boundaries of the evil expanded so much in a way that it's give legitimacy for evilness to happen in the name of excuses. And we have to judge these things that happening in moral discourse, okay? But without also to fall into, for me as Palestinian, we cannot fall also in seeing that both sides has the same power, okay? And this is something that we will talk about it, because these events is horrifying and cruel, okay? But at the same time, we need to see also them in a context, okay? We need to see them first as separate in order to judge them morally, but we also need to situate them in the context of
the power structure.
In the context of how this incident happening, why 7th of October happened, what was before 7th of October, and how also the genocide happening in Gaza that most of the Israelis agree and support it. We need to tackle
I'm not
this.
sure anymore. Like, I think that might, it's true that a lot of Israelis support it. Yeah, it's really, it's hard to know how many Israelis, it is absolutely horrifying. I'm just about what you just said, like that most Israelis support it, like, I don't know.
Now
I think it's like less and less. I think something like 64% of Israelis want right now to see something change. They want new leadership. I do think that the majority of Israelis right now want the war to end. So, I mean...
Yeah, but already, like the damage and the destroyment and the killing, ethnic cleansing, it's horrifying scenes coming, and there's a blind by most of the Israelis.
That's
but
true.
We'll tackle this probably in the coming. I want just to keep us...
Yes.
It's very hard reality, and we need to talk about it and to call for ceasefire.
Absolutely.
Definitely about what's happening now in Gaza. And also it's very concerning, but we will just be in this episode, and this podcast is elevating the voices of women and bringing a woman voice in a very courageous and a way that will destabilize and break this toxic discourse of hate and dehumanization, and also bring us some new information. We want these women to add for our information about reading the reality, about information about what's possible between Palestinian and Israelis, how we can end the occupation and solve the conflict, or where we can see the opportunities. Okay, so we are looking forward to be enriched.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
Fakhira, I'm looking forward.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me to share with you this journey.
And to be continued soon.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You've been listening to the podcast Women Ending War. I'm Dr. Elana Stockman, and my co-host is Eva Dalak. If you like this, please subscribe, share, like, and comment. Links to our channels on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple are below. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Substack. And please consider supporting us financially. We need your help. Link to our GoFundMe page is below. In peace, salam, and shalom.